So the PlayStation 5 is getting an official price increase, and many of you guys want me to discuss how that's going to affect the other systems on the market when it comes to competitors with the Xbox Series S and X, and also the Nintendo Switch, and even potentially what Nintendo's going to be doing next. And trust me, there is a ripple effect here, despite the price jump not being here in the US where I'm from. But what happens in other parts of the world definitely trickle into other areas and can definitely reach its way back to here, in addition to affecting what's being bought or sold long and short term. So we're going to discuss all of that, and like I said, I know a lot of you guys want to know how it relates to Nintendo Switch, so I'm definitely going to go in depth into that. But before we get into it, what's good everyone? OJ here. Welcome back to another video. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, and click that notification bell to get my videos first. Now first, let's talk about what the official information is and what Sony had to say about it. So Sony Interactive Entertainment will increase the price of the PlayStation 5 in select markets, including Europe, the United Kingdom, Japan, China, Australia, Mexico, and Canada, the company announced. Quote, "The global economic environment is a challenge that many of you around the world are no doubt experiencing," said Sony Interactive Entertainment President and CEO Jim Ryan in a PlayStation blog post. "We're seeing high global inflation rates as well as adverse currency trends impacting consumers and creating pressure on many industries. Based on these challenging economic conditions, Sony Interactive Entertainment has made the difficult decision to increase their recommended retail price, or RRP, of PlayStation 5 in select markets. There will be no price increase in the United States." We're going to talk about why there isn't in just a bit. Now, Ryan added this: "While this price increase is a necessity given the current global economic environment and its impact on Sony Interactive Entertainment's business, our top priority continues to be improving the PlayStation 5 supply situation so that as many players as possible can experience everything that PlayStation 5 offers and what's still to come." Now here is the new pricing for all the different markets. I will have it up on screen so you can see. The price jumps are not just a little price jump, they're actually significant when it comes to it. And when you start translating the currency in some of these places, like for example Europe to the US, I mean, it gets to be pretty high, especially Australia with that 800 Australian dollars for that. Or even like with Europe, man, they're already dealing with higher price games that are above what we pay. So it's like 70 bucks for a game. Theirs is higher than that, so the translation goes out to a lot more than $70. It's not a one-to-one conversion. And now you also jump the price on them on both models, guys. This is the disc version and also the digital version, so higher price games and also a higher price system in many of the big markets for them, like Europe, United Kingdom. Those are big for Sony and PlayStation 5. So everywhere else isn't quite as big when it comes to market share. Japan, they've kind of already lost that. Nintendo Switch is dominating. China, not really much there. Australia, the place is just too small, to be honest. Mexico, not much going on there. Canada, not as much there. So really, they didn't want to increase the price in the United States because they knew that if they did that, that would really be conceding the biggest market to Microsoft. Inflation has hit the US just as much as it hit any other place, right? So essentially what they're doing with this inflation is that they're passing it to the consumer in all other aspects of their business where they can get it. They just know that for them to be something, when it comes down to it, they have to make sure that they're not increasing the price against Microsoft and Nintendo here in the US, because that's their main market. That's where they're always really pushing their games to sell the most, is the US. Europe too, but definitely the US. So that's the reason why we're not seeing anything here in the US, because inflation and all this global economic problems and all this type of stuff is hitting the US as well. So that was a strategic thing to make sure that they can still compete with Microsoft and with Nintendo, but especially because they kind of see Microsoft as like the head-to-head here, because they're both doing kind of similar things with their business structures and models, although different in many aspects. they're still kind of doing the same thing, like with the power of the system and what they're trying to push. So that's kind of how I see it there. Obviously, this is something that affects everyone. I've had people try to tell me it doesn't affect you. You're here in the US. What does it matter? Well, I have family in different parts of the world. So if they tell me, hey, the prices are increasing, it's going to cost more. If I wanted to buy them, you know, a system, it's definitely going to be more. So it affects everyone. Plus, on top of that, my brand in terms of PlayerEssence, we have worldwide audience that watches this. So this is definitely going to be something I'm looking out for when it comes to other people that come to the stream. A lot of times people in America here, we focus in on just what's happening here and we don't look at what's happening in the world sometimes. And yeah, this is something that's happening around the world, so you need to be cognizant of it and don't be cocky as if it can't happen here in the US. Just because it's not happening right now doesn't mean there won't be a price increase later, or doesn't mean that they feel that they can do that. So it's one thing that also you have to just kind of look at. Now, I already have a PlayStation 5, so thankfully I already do, so it's not something that's going to affect me directly right now. But I can tell you, when it comes to how systems are priced and what's happening and price increases and in other parts of the world, it can definitely affect everyone when it comes to certain things and what you see in some of the prices that are in other types of products. So we'll see that ripple effect later, and if it does happen, or I think when it happens. Now, let's talk about how this relates to Microsoft, because I think this is a bit more simple in terms of things than when it comes to Nintendo. So now how it affects with Microsoft. Microsoft already has a system, when it comes down to it, that's priced lower with the Xbox Series S. The X is, I think, a bit higher or the same price as PS5 in many parts of the world. It's very different based on where you are and the currencies and stuff. So I'm not going to attempt to kind of break down every one, but I will say this. PlayStation has always had a bit of a stranglehold on much of the market recently, especially with the PlayStation 4. And the PS5 has definitely been selling better than the Xbox Series in most parts of the world. But now at this point, I think that this gives Microsoft a big boost. The fact that you will have a PS5 that is much higher priced over the Xbox Series S, and how the PS5 is going to be higher priced in many places than the Xbox Series X, that will give a boost to Microsoft. Along with Microsoft doing great advertising with Game Pass and everything, there could be a shift here. The only issue with this is the fact that Microsoft just simply can't produce enough of these Xboxes to really make a big dent into this if there is backlash or people not buying as many PlayStation 5s out there. So I think that's going to be something that we need to look at. Does Microsoft, or can Microsoft more like it, actually increase the flow of systems coming? Because they've been struggling to do so. I don't ever see Xbox Series S or X in stores. Like, I rarely ever see it. It's selling really well, but yet they're still underneath what the pace of the PlayStation 5 and also the Nintendo Switch sell. So they're struggling to really produce those systems because the chip shortage is biting at everyone. So Microsoft has had quite a bit of a challenge there. So we'll see if they're actually going to be able to take advantage of this. There's also another problem, because the Xbox Series X right now and S, they're not getting a lot of big exclusive games. They're not getting a lot of games that says, okay, I have to go out there and buy it. Starfield isn't here, Redfall isn't here. So it's not like they have a ton of new games coming out that's going to really say, hey, look at our Xbox, we have this shiny new game, go there and play it. All they have is like, hey, look at Game Pass, play third-party games or whatever. But those are games that can be found on PC, of course. Those are games that can be found on PlayStation, some of them on Nintendo Switch, whatever the case is, right? It's not like they have anything to really drive home the point of, we've got the cheaper system with no price increases, and look at this cool big new game. Like, let's say a Fable was here, or let's say a Perfect Dark or a Gears. So they don't have that, unfortunately. So I don't know what it's going to do in the short term. Now, in the long term, this can have huge implications for Microsoft. So I would expect Microsoft to pick things up in the long term, especially if they can launch Starfield and that game reviews really well and people are going out there and buying it like crazy or signing up for Game Pass like crazy, and Redfall is really good, and maybe they get out one or two more other big first-party games like a Perfect Dark or a Fable or something like that, or a Gears or whatever the case is. I think that could, in the long term, be a nice shift in terms of what people buy in many of these different parts of the world, but they need the actual content for that to get done. They just don't have it right now at this point, but they could get it later. Now, how does this affect Nintendo? What's going on with Nintendo and how does it affect them? Well, I think that at the end of the day, when you put aside all of the power and this and that, you got to look at what Nintendo's doing next. And I think that even with their next system, it's going to be cheaper than what Sony is charging here for the PlayStation 5. So already off the bat, when you're talking about a new system, it's a positive because it's probably going to be cheaper. If you're talking about what's happening right now with the Nintendo Switch, it once again solidifies because Nintendo does have the big first party games. They have the exclusives that, hey, you might want to pick up this system instead. Yes, it's not having the shiniest new graphics or the biggest performance or whatever the case is, but you're going to be able to play really high quality games right now. And you're going to have a huge backlog of big Switch games that have already came out that still sell very well and people still talk about right now at this point, like Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Super Mario Odyssey, obviously Xenoblade Chronicles 3 just came out, but Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, you know, you've got a ton of games for people to pick up and play, and more games are coming out every single month. We're getting big first party games on the regular with the Nintendo Switch. So I think it solidifies once again in many of these different areas, like, hey, the Nintendo Switch is a good option for people right now at this point. Now we have to wait and see long term because obviously the Nintendo Switch isn't going to be around for 2 or 3 more years. This current Switch that we have, I mean, the system will be around because it's sold too much for it to just disappear after the next system comes out. But Nintendo will probably release their next Switch within the next 1.5 to 2 years or so, or we'll know about it. So in the long term, I think that we have to wait and see with it, but within the short term, right now at this point, it solidifies the Nintendo Switch is probably still going to be the top selling system in most parts of the world. We're seeing obviously Japan, Sony has completely thrown in the towel in that region, which is big for Nintendo. Nobody else really even, you know, steps to Nintendo in that market. It's just crazy, which is dominating there. But I think that once again in Europe, there could be a shift too, where the Nintendo Switch has made quite the comeback from the Nintendo 3DS and the Wii U, where both of those systems didn't necessarily do great. The Wii U did horrible and the 3DS did okay at times. But with the Nintendo Switch, it's doing much better than both of those systems. So I think that that further expands what Nintendo can do in Europe and in some of those markets. Now in Canada, it's always been doing great. In other places, it's always been doing great. So the market shift and what's going on there, I mean, we'll see what happens. But for the most part, I see Nintendo continuing to do extremely well as long as they can continue to get the Nintendo Switch OLEDs out there, continue to launch great software, get Breath of the Wild ready to go early next year. I think that Nintendo is going to be set up really well as they ride out the rest of the Switch life. I think the biggest thing to kind of take away from all of this, the biggest thing that gamers need to understand or learn with this is that there are reasons why everything is done. You don't have to like them. You don't have to like what's going on. But I do personally feel, just my own personal opinion on this, is that it was a difficult decision for Mr. Jim Ryan, but I'm not exactly in love with his decisions that he's made. There are a number of decisions that PlayStation has made that I'm saying, I'm not so sure about that. Now, they make plenty of money. They do a great job. So it's not like you can sit here and say that Jim Ryan needs to be 1,000,000% fired or anything like that, because Jim Ryan is making a lot of money for PlayStation. But at the same time, some of the decisions that I've seen, I'm just like, well, wait a minute here. Closing down Japan studio, I don't think that was a decision that needed to be done. I don't think that was something that had to be done, or their business was going to just really collapse under the pressure or under the financial stress or problems of it. Like, I get that Japan studio wasn't necessarily making as much money as their other studios, and they don't create the type of games that Sony is known for at this point with like Uncharted and stuff like that. But I do feel that there was a way to incorporate them to try, as your first studio ever, to try and get them to make something that would be popular worldwide, to be popular from a large base, for a large base that Sony likes to go for. I don't think that sacking them at this point or taking them down at this point is something that needed to be done. I just don't feel that it was something that had to be done despite some of the failures of their previous games. I felt that they deserve another shot on PlayStation 5 to make something, and to make something great. So it's very unfortunate with decisions like that. You know, obviously now we have at this point the price increase. We have stuff like there being a Gravity Rush movie, Sony really spending a lot on movies, and we're not seeing as many of some of the big games out there for some of these franchises. So for example, Gravity Rush, you know, it's like, wait a minute, you completely shut down the studio that made it, and there's no more Gravity Rush that when it comes to games, at least right now at this point, but now there's a movie coming up. It's like, whoa, wait a minute here, you know? So that's some of the issues that I'm seeing here. But once again, that's just my opinion. I'm not calling for the pitchforks for Jim Ryan to lose his job. I wouldn't want that on anybody unless they did something terrible. But at the same time, I'm just going over what I feel with Jim Ryan leading. But at this point, I think the investors do like him. He is making Sony a lot of money, so I don't really see him going anywhere anytime soon right now. But we'll see how this actually affects the PlayStation business and what happens. I think it's going to be incredibly interesting. But what are your thoughts on this price increase and how it could affect Microsoft and Nintendo? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and we will see you for the next video. Peace.